Hello, welcome to our virtual training on the basics of using Gmail. Before we get started, just a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll be covering in this session the Gmail app, and we'll look at how to access your account, how to navigate Gmail, how to configure your settings in Gmail. We'll also take a deep dive into how to organize your content in Gmail using labels, filters, and Gmail's archiving process. We'll then take a look at how to manage your email conversations, and we'll talk about composing. All right, so for the purposes of this demonstration, I have kind of a training account here with some sample content. This is very similar to what your account is going to look like, except you'll see your own company logo or organization logo in the upper left-hand corner. When you're accessing Gmail, one of the biggest differences between this and Microsoft Outlook is that Gmail is a browser-based email application. So you need to open a browser and use a browser to access Gmail. There's not a desktop client like you have for Outlook. So we recommend using Google Chrome in conjunction with Gmail, since Chrome is also published by Google. There are probably far fewer sort of glitches or technical problems when you're using Gmail with Chrome as opposed to a different browser. Although you can use basically any of the mainstream browsers, Internet Explorer, Firefox, or Safari, as long as you're using an up-to-date version of the browser. Google does officially support those other browsers. To access your account, you'll go to mail.google.com and enter your full email address in order to sign in. Your password should be the same as the password for your Learn computer. If you have not recently reset your password, you will need to reset that prior to logging into your Gmail account. And we have some instructions which you will be sent via email on how to reset your password for your computer if you're not familiar with that process. All right, so as far as the app goes, we will start by taking kind of a high-level look at the interface for Gmail. We'll talk about how to navigate your way around the application. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a couple different options here. One is the gear. We'll come back to this button later, but the important thing to note here is this is where you go to access your account settings. You'll also see a button with your first initial, and if you click on that, this is where you go to sign out of your account. So if you're using a shared console and you're done checking your email, it's a great idea to sign out just to make sure that the next person doesn't pull up Chrome and see your account automatically. The other button to note in the upper right-hand corner is the Apps button. And this is where we go to navigate to some of our other available Google applications. Now bear in mind this is a test account, so you may not see the same applications that I have in this list. But we will be in a separate session. We'll be talking about Google Calendar and also Google Contacts. And so using the Apps button is the easiest way to access those because you're not asked to enter your password or your username again. It'll simply just pull up the application. In the center of the screen, you have the search bar. Searching in Gmail is very important. It's actually probably the quickest way to find what you're looking for in the Gmail app. The search tool is very powerful. You can use a number of different search operators. If you just do a cursory search of the web for Gmail search operators, you'll pull up a very extensive list. There are also some operators built into Gmail. You can see if you click the drop down to expand the advanced search options, there are some different operators we can use here, such as from, to, subject, and so on. Note that you can also search in different locations in your account. So if you've created labels, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes, you can specify that you are only searching within a specific label in your account. Also, at the top of the screen on the left-hand side, there's a drop-down menu. And this is where you go to access your contact list and also your task list. So we'll actually be covering these in a separate video when we also talk about Google Calendar. But if you're wondering where to find those things, you can access them from here. You may have noticed that contacts you can also access through the apps button. Next, we have the Compose button. So again, we'll come back to this in more detail a little bit later in the session. But of course, this is where you go to start composing a new message. And beneath that, you have your labels, which are like Gmail's equivalent of folders. Again, we'll come back to that in more detail. At the bottom of this list on the left-hand side is your Google Chat list, Hangouts chat. This is something that we'll cover in that separate video when we talk about contacts and tasks. But you will notice this gadget in your Gmail account. You can use this to search for other contacts in your organization, send them instant messages, and so on. If you end up not using this, note that you can actually toggle the visibility of this list on or off with this button here at the bottom. So if you prefer to see your labels instead, you can clear up all of that real estate and allocate it essentially specifically for the labels in your account. Okay, so next up on our agenda is Gmail settings. And this is important because there are a lot of settings available for Gmail, and also because while we are able to migrate your data from Outlook in terms of your email and folders and things like that, we are not able to migrate your settings. So there are a number of different settings that you'll need to reconfigure when you first start using Gmail, such as your signature, any out-of-office notifications you have put in place, and so on. So as I pointed out a few minutes ago, to access your settings, you click on the gear in the upper right-hand corner, then you click on the settings option. The first page that comes up when you click on settings is the general settings. You'll see a number of different tabs across the top of the your account, and we'll go through some of these very briefly in just a few minutes, but we'll spend most of our time talking about some of the more salient apps under general. So I will not go through all of these one by one for the sake of time, but a couple that are important. Your default text style, this allows you to change your default font style, size, color, etc. You also have the ability to enable or disable conversation view. And we haven't talked about conversation view yet in this training. We will get to it a little bit later after we talk about organization. But essentially, conversation view is the way that Gmail will combine different emails together into a thread based on the subject line. So we'll cover that in more detail, but the thing to take away for now is that if you don't like this, you can disable it in your settings. There's a way to turn it off. There's also a feature here called Undo Send. Undo Send is kind of like a recall feature. It's a time delay on sending a message from Gmail. So if you enable Undo Send, you can choose up to a 30-second delay after you click the Send button. During that time, there's an option. You'll see a status bar, top center of your account. You can click Undo to cancel sending that email, and it reverts you back to a draft state, and you can continue to edit your draft. So this is very useful if at the very last second you remember that you forgot to CC somebody or add an attachment, or you misspelled something, etc. Stars are very much like flags. Stars are something that you can add to messages in Gmail. They're kind of like bookmarks and also act as a visual cue. So if you click the little star button next to each message in Gmail, it applies a star. It makes the message a little more visible in your inbox. There's also a starred label by default in Gmail. So again, these act kind of like bookmarks. If you add a star, you can go up to the starred label and you can view all of your starred messages. You'll notice that there are a couple different styles and colors of stars. You can drag and drop these from the in use to the not in use section. And in order to cycle through the different colors and styles, when you are applying a star, you just click multiple times on that star button and you'll cycle through the different colors. Desktop notifications are like the pop-ups you receive when you get a new email. So you can choose to enable those if you prefer. And we also have the signature field, and I think this is one of the more important settings that we'll be covering in this part of the presentation. The signature is something that you're going to need to reconfigure. If you had a signature in Outlook, it was not migrated to Gmail. So you'll need to take a few moments and kind of recreate your signature in Gmail. It's very simple. You just click this little toggle button to turn on your signature, and then you compose it using the field and the formatting options provided. Lastly, under General Settings, we have a Vacation Responder. And the Vacation Responder is Gmail's out-of-office system. So what you do is you turn this on, you pick your first day and your last day out of the office, and then you enter your subject and your message. So again, just like the out-of-office feature in Outlook, Google calls it Vacation Responder. It's different terminology, but the exact same function. Anytime that you make any changes to your account settings, it's very important that you click Save Changes. And at the very bottom of the settings page, you'll see the Save Changes button. If you try to navigate away from the page, you should get a pop-up reminding you that your changes won't be applied unless you save them. So we'll kind of go through the rest of these tabs here at the top. I'll actually kind of skip over some that aren't really relevant to our scope of our training. But the first tab we have here is the Labels tab. I've alluded to labels a couple different times throughout this training. Labels are Gmail's equivalent of folders. So one of the easier ways to create labels or to edit existing labels is to use this area in your account settings. And if you go down to the labels section here, you'll see that you can click on each label and edit the name. So if you're changing, let's say, the naming convention of the labels that you've got, it's very quick to come into settings, go to the labels tab, and then you can just click on each one and rename it. There are options to edit labels from the sidebar. When you click on each label, I'll cover that in just a few minutes. But as far as speed is concerned, if you're renaming a lot of them, settings is a bit more efficient. Under the Inbox tab, you'll see there are a couple different options for viewing the content of your inbox, essentially. So there are several different ways to sort of sort your data by creating different sections in your inbox. So you can experiment with these settings if you're so inclined. Those are, again, located under the Inbox tab. Filters we'll come back to a little bit later after we talk about labels. If you need to edit or delete any filters that you've put in place, you can do so in the settings. You'll see a list of the filters you've created. Lastly, we have the Labs tab. And Labs are like additional settings that are available for Gmail. As you can see, there are quite a few different labs that are available for use. There is a disclaimer at the top stating that these are kind of like experimental features for Gmail and that they may not always work. In my experience, they do usually work and are very reliable. So I would not hesitate to apply any labs that you think might be beneficial. And just to give you an example of some labs that are useful, Canned Responses is a way to kind of save email templates and quickly insert bodies of text into messages when you're composing them. We've got Preview Pane. I'll actually enable this and kind of show you what it does in just a few minutes. And Right Side Chat is another one that's useful. If you like to use the Google Chat, you can actually move your chat list over to the right-hand side of the screen so that you see your chat list on the right and your labels on the left. Anytime we enable a lab, you need to click Save Changes. Actually, I'm going to have to go in and change that. So Apparently it won't let me save my changes if I've chosen a vacation responder that's enabled but not entered a message. So let me go back to our preview pane lab. So it's still set on enable. Go ahead and hit save. So what this lab does, and you can see there's a little call out here for this, it's added a new button in Gmail in the upper right-hand corner. And this allows you to toggle between a reading pane in your account. So you can use a vertical reading pane, horizontal reading pane. So this, in a lot of ways, is kind of like what you're used to seeing in Outlook. So that's just one example of a lab that is pretty useful and functional day to day. All right, next up on the agenda, we'll talk about how to organize the content that's in your account. And we're going to start by talking about labels. So I've mentioned labels a couple times throughout this presentation, and I mentioned that they're very similar to folders. So on the surface and at a basic level, they appear to function like folders, and they serve basically the same purpose. So if I have a message in my account, let's say I've created a label here, I've called it test, I drag and drop the message to that label, it's removed from my inbox, and now when I click on that label, I can see that message. So no surprises here. It pretty much works like you would expect a folder to work. In order to create a label, if I click on More, there is an option down here to create a new one. As you saw a couple minutes ago, you can also create new labels through the Labels tab in your account settings. But if I go to create a new label, I'll just call this Test 2. And notice that you have the option to nest this label under another label. So if you need to create a hierarchy, like you would have folders and subfolders in Outlook, you can do that with labels in Gmail. So you name your label, click Create. One thing that you can do that's pretty nice is if you hover over the label, there are a couple different options here. You'll see there's a little pick list for each label. And you can assign a color to each label to make it stand out a little more in your inbox or when you're looking at any of the messages in your account. So where it starts to get a little interesting is when we look at applying more than one label to a message. So labels are not the same as folders, even though they serve the same purpose. There are additional capabilities that using labels kind of confers on your account. So if you drag a label to a message in your inbox, so notice we've done the reverse, we've dragged from the label to the message, we apply the label in addition to any other labels that the message has, and that includes the inbox label. The best way to visualize this and understand how this works is to look at the all mail section of your account. So all mail is like a master index of all of the messages that you've received in your account, except for those that you've deleted or marked as spam. So we can see here when we look at this message that the message has the inbox label on it, and it also has my test label that I've applied. So when a message arrives in your account, Gmail says, hey, that's a brand new message. Let's apply the inbox label so Brian sees it in his inbox. And so inbox in that respect is no different than any other label that you've created. So this is where it's a little different than the idea of a folder, because in Outlook you had a folder. It was a location where so a message would exist in one folder or another. In Gmail, all of your messages sort of exist in the all mail bucket in your account. There's just one huge index of all of your messages, but they have different labels. And so the labels are how you find the messages. It's how you tag them. So again, same sort of end result as using folders, but the execution is a little bit different. And you'll see that if you click on a label to view it, a couple things. So one, you'll see that you'll actually see any other labels that the message has. So this message here is both has the test 2 label and the inbox label, so I can see that called out here. You'll also notice that the way that Gmail does this is it's basically just searching for messages that have that label in your account. And you can actually see the search operator here, label : and then the name of your label. So that's how Gmail is actually displaying those messages that you've added that label to. So you have a greater deal of flexibility when we're talking about using labels as opposed to folders, because of course you can apply multiple labels to a single message, so you can go back and find the message in a couple different places. You can of course always find messages based on searching as well, so that's always an option. Even if a message doesn't have a label, you can still search for it and find it in your account. And that's a great segue into the next thing we're going to talk about, which is how archiving works in Gmail. The word archive is kind of a loaded word, at least when it comes to Gmail, because Google uses this terminology to describe an action that you can take on messages in your account. But Gmail doesn't have a separate archive per se. Outlook, of course, you could create separate folders, personal folders, PST files, where you would basically store messages on your local computer as opposed to in your mailbox, which are stored on the email server. So Gmail in that context doesn't have a separate archive. You just have a ton of space in Gmail, and there's really no need for a separate archive. So there's this archive button in Gmail, which you'll see. So if you click on a message, you'll see one option here is archive. So what does this actually do? Why would they use this terminology? So if you click the archive button, you'll notice that the message is removed from your inbox. And if you go to all mail, you'll see that the message wasn't deleted or moved anywhere outside of your account. Basically, the only thing that happened was the inbox label was removed. So what the archive button does in Gmail is it simply strips the inbox label off of whatever message you have selected. So I think the word archive is a bit misleading when we're talking about what this actually does. Again, there's not a separate archive. But if you like to get to inbox 0, where you don't have a lot of stuff in your inbox, archiving in Gmail is a great way to remove things from your inbox. Because if you've applied a label to the message, you can always go back and find it via the label. Even if the message doesn't have a label, you can run a search and you can find that that message using the search function. But either way, it's not in your inbox, so it's not sort of cluttering your account when you open it. Okay, so there's another feature that we'll cover. So that we've looked at labels, we looked at archiving. The next feature is filters. And you may or may not be familiar with the general concept around filters. It's very similar to how a rule looks in Outlook, or how a rule works, rather. And so if you're not familiar at all with rules or filters, basically what this allows you to do is to establish like a search parameter. So you are kind of narrowing down messages that are coming into your account, and then you're taking an automatic action on those messages based on whether or not they match that criteria. So for instance, if you want every email that comes from your, let's say, your supervisor to go to a specific label automatically, you can create a filter for that. So as those messages arrive in your account, that label is applied automatically, and you can then go and find the message in the label. You don't have to do anything manually. So in order to create a label, we actually use the search functionality. So when you go to the search bar and you click on the little drop down as if you were going to conduct an advanced search, you'll see in the bottom right hand corner there's an option that says create filter with this search. So we need to establish kind of a parameter for our search first. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, I have a lot of junk mail in here from BetterCloud. So I'm just going to, that'll be my parameter for this filter. So I'll say any message that comes in with the subject, with the word BetterCloud in the subject, I want to take a specific action on. And so I've entered this. I'll go to create filter with this search. And now I have a list of actions that I can take on this message when it arrives. So probably the most common use case for a filter is to apply a label, as I mentioned. So I'll just say, I want to apply the label that I created a bit earlier. You can also choose sort of a combination of actions. So if I want the messages to not appear in my inbox, I can check this option. So if I get a message that matches this, it won't show up in my inbox, but it will get this label. So if I click on that label, I can find those messages. If I don't check this, this is actually a lot like a category, a color category, because we have a colored label that's going to be applied to the message, and you'll see that in your inbox when you're looking at your inbox. The other thing that you can do is you can check this option at the bottom, which says also apply the filter to 3 matching or whatever X number of matching conversations. So it's actually run a search of the content in my account, and it's identified 3 messages that match this criteria. And so what I can do is I can choose to go and sort of retroactively take this action on messages that I've already received. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll click Create Filter. And if I scroll through my account, I should see a couple messages that match that have that label. So there should actually be 3. And indeed, we do see 3 messages that have had that label applied. So that is how filters work. Again, if you're familiar with rules in Outlook, pretty much the same thing, although you will need to create all of the filters from scratch in Google. If you had rules in Outlook, there's not really a way for us to migrate or port those over into Gmail. For the final portion of the training on Gmail, we're going to cover managing messages and composing them. So the first thing we'll look at when we talk about managing messages is working with conversations in your inbox. And as I mentioned a little earlier in the session, conversations are groups of emails that Gmail groups together automatically based on a common subject. So if you look in your inbox, you'll notice that some messages have a number next to the sort of the recipients of those emails. And this indicates the number of messages that comprise that conversation. When you click on a conversation in Gmail, what you see is the essentially the headers or sort of a preview of each message, starting with the oldest message at the top, working down to the newest message at the bottom. This is kind of a backwards order for those of you that are used to working in Outlook and kind of reading from newest to oldest. What I'll say that what will help you sort of alleviate that kind of disorientation in Gmail is that you can actually still read the quoted text in Gmail just like you could in Outlook, but Google just sort of automatically trims that content so that you don't need to to see that as you're going through and reviewing the messages. If you click on the trimmed content button, you can actually read through the quoted text like normal, or you can read the original messages above that. In addition to being able to view the previous messages in a conversation, you can also take action on the conversation just like you would reply to a normal email. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the message, you have a reply button. There's also a drop-down here where you'll find the option to reply to all if there's multiple recipients, and you can forward this as well. You'll note that when you're forwarding this, you're actually forwarding this particular message along with the quoted text. At the top, there's an option to forward all, which will forward all of the individual messages in the conversation. So there's a slight difference between this forwarding option and the forward option that you'll see under the More menu. Composing messages in Gmail is also quite easy. So as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there's a button in the upper left-hand corner which says Compose, so no surprises there. You'll notice when you click on that, the default sort of format for composing a draft in Gmail is a little pop-up box that you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner. This is pretty convenient. You can minimize and maximize these windows, and you can actually work on several different messages at once in that way. However, if you do like composing in a separate browser window, you can hold the Shift key and then left-click on the Compose button, and it'll open up in a new window. So if you prefer to compose that way, it's pretty easy to do it. When you're composing a message, it's pretty straightforward in terms of the recipients. However, you can click on this To button here, and it'll actually pull up your contacts. In this case, I don't have any contacts in this test account, but you'll see your contact list here, so you can choose people from your contacts or search that list. You can add CC or BCC fields by clicking on those links on the right-hand side of the screen. When you are composing an email, the spell check will happen automatically, so you'll see misspelled words underlined in red. There's also a spell check option under the More Options menu in the bottom right-hand corner, so you can check spelling. That'll highlight any misspelled words in yellow. When you're working on a draft, the draft saves automatically, so you don't need to worry about hitting save or losing your work if you navigate away. And you'll notice there's a drafts label by default in Gmail that allows you to view any drafts and pick up where you left off. The canned responses lab that I mentioned a little earlier when we looked at labs, if you enable that, there'll be an option under More that allows you to insert your sort of canned response templates that you've created, so that makes it a little easier. You'll also see that there's a label option, so you can actually label a message as it's going out, so that that label's applied right when you send the email. The last thing that we'll cover when you're composing is priorities. And so priorities are actually not something that is built into Gmail. So there's not actually an importance indicator or priority marker that you can put on the email that the recipient will see. So our recommendation is that when you're composing the message, you just add high priority to the subject, and that'll help call out that it's an urgent message to the recipient. One last sort of nuance when you're sending emails in Gmail that I just want to call out is that if you are sending an email to a group or a distribution list and you are a member of that distribution list, you will not get the message in your inbox. So Gmail deliberately does that because it just assumes that since you sent the message, you don't need to see it in your inbox. So you'll actually be able to see that in your sent mail, but you won't see it come into your inbox. So if you send a message to a group and you don't see that come into your inbox, don't worry. It's not that it didn't get delivered. It's just Gmail's sort of natural behavior. So that pretty much wraps up the training for Gmail. If you want to learn more about Google Calendar, we'll have a separate video for that. So you can watch that video. We'll cover Google Calendar, Google Contacts, tasks, and a little bit more on the Hangouts chat features. Thank you.